this is what happened on one of these ones. This is called signage. The sign said, "We buy houses," but for a moment I thought it said, "We buy mouses." I was going to give linguistic advice that the plural of mouse, well, it's blatantly mice. But I took a second and I read it again. I let the words from the sign filter into my brain, and I saw that my eyes had indeed been deceived, that everything seen should not be believed. More troubling though was that my first thought was that someone was willing for mice to be bought. Not only that, but to say on a house that someone would purchase any spare mouse. For what purpose? For what diabolical plot? What would require all the mice that you've got? It's a terrifying thought, I'm sure you'll agree. It was certainly something worrying me. An organisation purchasing mice that was willing to advertise, despite the price, was making me wonder if something was planned that required armies of rodents to take over from man. Perhaps it's like the Hitchhiker's Guide, and intelligent mice who for years had to hide are coming out of the shadows, are buying themselves clear of animal testing and a pink lipstick smear. They'll take over from us, and worse, make us slaves rolling wheels of cheese through a huge pointless maze, and for what purpose? Well, we may never know. Perhaps it will be that they just want to show who is the boss, who is in charge, that despite being small, they're living it large. It could be for this, or for some greater cause that will help to redress current natural laws, that the strong shall be weak and the weak shall be strong. Maybe this was their plan all along. And all of this was my first thought. How the language was wrong only barely held court. All of this madness just from a sign. Go get me some help. I'm sure I'll be fine. Now, part of the wonderful thing of meeting Simon and getting to know him is that we've set up a bit of a challenge between the two of us. Obviously he's, phenomenal writer of prose fiction and of, full-length stories. You are, shut up. And the flash fiction and everything he's done. And, I do okay with the poems. So we set an idea to challenge ourselves with an image that one of us would select, and both of us would use that base image as something to try and create a piece of work from. And nominally we gave ourselves a time limit, and we'd have a go at it. And we started off brilliantly, we were on it. And then the last two images haven't gone onto the blog, we've not done anything with. One of mine that I selected has turned into a full-length story-length poem for me, and Si's been working on it for a while.
8 months.
Then he's selected an image which I completed instantaneously, and Si's now written 2 stories for. So I'm going to debut the one that he's did, and I did instantaneously here. And this is a picture of quite a fetching redhead holding a fox to her chest. This is my vixen poem. Held against her breast, I feel safe. And as our heartbeats intertwine, my own so fast, hers so slow, I realise something that's hard to define, but which both of us soon will know. That held against her breast, I feel safe. That we merge into each other, red into red, shoulder and head, becoming one, and yet still apart. Safety in numbers, though only 2 hearts. Thank you. I'm going to do a change round. There was a poem that I was going to do but I'll do it at some point because I think it needs a bit of tinkering with. The one that I did that's based around here was actually, I managed to probably be the only person who managed to come while Edward wasn't here, which was a stroke of genius on my part. It's just absolutely, yeah, what amazing planning that was. Sorry, Edward. But what it meant was I got a chance to come here and take a very quick kind of mental snapshot, because let's be honest, you could spend most of the rest of your creative life in here just finding stuff to do. So I came in here and had a very quick look round, and there's one thing that instantly jumped out at me, and it's the current. The bones of you rest, Cast iron kettles look languidly down at you from high roof beams, stirring occasionally from wistful, steamy dreams, while the bones of you rest. Once you were sapling fresh and grounded, rooted in the deep, strong earth, growing toward a future that sounded implausible, where one's worth was calculated in flexibility and strength, in straight living meters that might be bent into purpose. The bones of you rest, while cast iron kettles look languidly down, and yet in wonder, at something that came from earth, but now on water is stronger. This is the one that Si was talking about that went up onto the Guardian website. That's, yeah, it means a lot to me. It's one that I wanted to write about the subject it tackles with for a long time, and struggled with how to approach it. And every time that I had done it sounded, well, crap, honestly. And I didn't know a way into it. And my dad knew that I was struggling, and because he is a much smarter man than me, found a way of happening to mention one day last year, I've got this idea going around in my head, this phrase, maybe you could do something with it. Right. Dutifully wrote it down and took a look at it later that night, and this poem came from it. Now, the only problem with that phrase that he gave me is you need to have a basic understanding of marine biology. Specifically how pearls are formed naturally in oysters. So just in case people aren't familiar with how it happens, what usually happens is an irritant of some form gets inside the shell and the oyster can't get rid of it. So the oyster coats that irritant in mucus, which dries and hardens, and it does this again and again until a pearl is formed. Now, this does mean, of course, that people are wearing as decorative jewellery something which is, to all intents and purposes, oyster snot. I apologise if that ruins it for anybody, but all of this comes round to this phrase that my dad gave me, and it became the title. And that phrase is, "It's the grit that makes the pearl." Now, I should tell you this before we start. This is a topic very close to my heart. It is a tale of past events and, in turn, what they have meant to me in terms of who I am now. The words I'm speaking will hopefully show how that the title of this poem is ultimately true. So now I'll begin the story for you. Throughout my schooling, I was always considered tall. I did well in my lessons, though by no means all, and I would never suggest that. I don't have the gall. But the combination of my height, that when starting primary school I could already read and write, and I never really ever put up much of a fight in my defence, meant that I became someone to tease. The kids could get a reaction from me with apparent ease, and because I always wanted to please, I kept it inside. I kept it to myself, and though I didn't know it at the time, I let it affect my mental health, despite knowing in my heart that there were a wealth of options available for me to take. So I made an error in judgment. I made a mistake that many of us still continue to make. I didn't reach out when I should have done. I let the kids carry on with their fun, thinking that when I changed school I would be done with having to put up with the taunts and punches that came my way on all breaks and lunches in constant, demoralising, painful bunches. I thought when I changed to this brand new school with its very visual anti-bullying rule that finally everything would be cool. But I came to quickly realise that school policy was meant for parents' eyes and was not in effect for someone of my size. When the bullying started, I went to the teacher. I begged and I pleaded. I tried to beseech her to make use of the school's anti-bullying feature. But what I was told, what the teacher chose to say, was that help was not going to come my way. That I would have to suffer day after day, week after week, with no end in sight. That at the end of the tunnel there was no light. So I kind of gave up the fight. Now that's a terrible thing. 11 years old, feeling like you've been left out in the cold, any trust you had put on hold. Not knowing on who you could rely, when what you were told was so obviously a lie. It got to the stage that I wanted to die. Now, I'm not proud that this is the case. I could have edited this out to try and save face, but frankly, I need to give you at least a taste of what was going on at the time. That for a while I'd lost my mind and had no idea as to how to find a way out of the hell that I found myself in. I genuinely thought that through suicide, maybe I could win back some points from those who had been my tormentors throughout each school year. That maybe I could make them shed just one tear in payment for all of those shed in the depths of my fear. Somehow, I was brought back from the brink. I got a second chance, some more time to think, where I came to understand that I could be a strong link. But man, was I lucky. The next school I went to had a teaching staff that actually knew about bullying and what to do should it appear within the student population. So when it did try to rise again, they noticed my hesitation and asked me for an explanation. The problems that I was having were dealt with fast, and my being bullied became a thing of the past. If it didn't sound so cliche American, I'd say I had a blast at that school. I made friends and I had fun. Things that I'd never really done when, for me, school had begun. It was at that school that I was inspired by English teachers to explore the fires of my creativity and, yeah, even these poetic desires. From them, the confidence I gained helped me in numerous ways to train to put my life within a frame of reference that I could abide. And though there will always be a little part of me that's terrified of the depression that I felt, I try and keep that tucked away inside. I now use that as a rock upon which to stand, knowing that my life is safe within these hands, that having been through hell, I can now withstand anything that is placed in front of me. My experiences have in fact helped me to see the positives in what could most likely be a very odd and interesting life. And I'm under no illusions that it'll be free of strife, but at least now I'm prepared to roll the dice. Because whatever may come, I'll be prepared for it. The good, the bad, and even the utter shit. Because what makes a pearl, well, it's the grit. Thank you.
BigCharlie Poet.